Good morning, Alamance Presbyterian Church. It's your Associate Pastor, Jess. I hope that you're having a good week thus far. And today I wanted to talk about a devotional practice, a spiritual practice that's been around for hundreds of years, that's brought a lot of meaning to my life. And I'm sure many of you already do this practice, but you don't necessarily call it by its given name. And that practice is the Ignatian Examen. The Ignatian Examen is named, of course, after St. Ignatius of Loyola, who wrote about it in his book, The Spiritual Exercises. But it came to be because before St. Ignatius was a saint, before he was even a monk, or involved in any religion in any kind of life-altering way, St. Ignatius of Loyola was a soldier. He was a knight, and he went to the Battle of Pamplona in Spain to fight. And he had all these notions of what it meant to be a knight, of chivalry and of valor. And he had sort of structured his entire life around gaining meaning through chivalry and valor and fighting and these achievements that could happen in war. And in the Battle of Pamplona, he got hit with a cannonball and right in his legs. And this is the 1500s. So medicine then isn't what it is now, and St. Ignatius of Loyola gets bedridden for quite a while, and that while becomes even longer because initially his bones healed wrong and they had to re-break them so that they would heal correctly. And as Ignatius is lying in his bed convalescing, he starts to think about his life and reflect on his life, and he happens to read the lives of the saints as one of the things to fill his time. And he starts to realize that while he was living into these higher values, he wasn't getting much meaning out of them. He wasn't really finding his purpose through being a knight. And so as he reflects on this more and more, he starts to realize that the life of a monk feels much more in line with his values and his ultimate purpose. And so he becomes a monk and he goes on pilgrimages. And eventually, he founds the order of the Jesuits. Jesuit priests come from the mind and the practices of St. Ignatius of Loyola. And he pens this book called, as I mentioned already, The Spiritual Exercises, and in it he outlines how he came to this conclusion. And what he did was, as he was lying in his hospital bed every day, he would reflect on what he was most grateful for that day. And he would reflect on what he was least grateful for that day. And these things didn't have to necessarily be events that made him feel happy or events that made him feel sad, right? Sometimes he was most grateful for those opportunities to grieve. And sometimes he was least grateful for those opportunities that would seem to be, the things that made him happiest. And he started tracking this, and that's the practice that became known as the Examen, was checking in with yourself about the events of your day, just to acknowledge where you felt most gratitude, closest to God, that's what we call our consolation, and where you felt least gratitude, or the furthest from God, and that's what we call desolation. And Ignatius said in his book, The Spiritual Exercises, it's wisely said that experience is the best teacher. The primary and most obvious reason for this is that revelation is not over. God is constantly revealing God's self to us in our experience. Of course, the Bible is divine revelation. No one denies that. But so is life. It is precisely because God is present to life and available to human experience that we have a divinely inspired story to tell. And that story, once told, is revelation. And so I'd like to encourage you to try this spiritual practice this week. You can do it with your families as you sit down. Some people find it really helpful to light a candle when they begin the Ignatian Examen, and it's usually done in the evening so you can reflect on the entirety of your day. You can check in with one another. And one of the reasons to do that is because it invites accountability. there are patterns to our days. There are patterns to what brings us gratitude and what causes us to distance ourselves from gratitude. And when you speak about that with other people, they can help you reflect on how you might change your behavior so that you can get more consolation out of your day and less desolation out of your day. Now, if you live by yourself, you can also do that through journaling. You can just write down your consolations and your desolations. And I have done that in the past and seen a very clear pattern that has empowered me to change some of my behaviors so that I can find more gratitude and grace and meaning and purpose in my daily activities and less fear and anxiety and things that make me feel distant and apart from God. So I encourage you, church, this week to take some time every evening, light a candle, reflect on your day, reflect on those questions. What have I been most grateful for today? What have I been least grateful for today? And write them down and see how a pattern emerges and how you might be empowered to, with God's grace and with God's help, change those patterns for the better. I love you, church. I miss you, church. I hope you'll engage in this meaningful practice, and I look forward to hearing about how it's touched your lives. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.